So I'll just introduce our final speaker. So Dr. Elizabeth Braun comes to the Lab Safety Institute after leading a team of teachers in developing the chemistry curriculum for Cypress-Fairbanks ISD in Texas, where she also oversaw the safety program. She has worked the last 3 years developing a chemical hygiene plan and creating standard operating procedures for the safe handling, storage, and disposal of chemicals in the district. She was also responsible for rolling out safety initiatives to the teachers through professional development trainings that she created and facilitated. She has a passion for science safety and brings 8 years of experience in public education, 6 years of graduate research experience in chemistry, and 5 years of college level teaching experience to the team. She holds her bachelor's degree in chemistry from Sam Houston State University, master's and doctoral degrees in chemistry from the University of Texas at Dallas. Elizabeth has 7 peer-reviewed publications in the field of bioanalytical chemistry and was selected as the inaugural Teacher of the Year for Bridgeland High School in her second year of teaching.
All right, thank you. All right, I thank you guys so much for doing the poll. I was just trying to get a feel for who all was joining us today. As I shared, I am the Director of Educational Content at the Laboratory Safety Institute, and I'm really excited to share with you today. Let me share my screen. Um, let's do that.
Can you all see the poll results? I've never done this before. So
Yeah,
I
I can
press
see the poll
share.
result.
Awesome. Okay. I'll stop sharing, but some interesting numbers in here.
Yeah, it's great. Love it. Okay, so I'm going to get started by just kind of giving you some background. Um, again, let's see, there it goes. I was like, it's not moving. So I'm Elizabeth, obviously, but our board chair, Timothy Barton, is the Chief Safety Officer and Director of Research and Safety Affairs with the University of Tennessee Health Science. So he did help curate some of this content with respect to the methylene chloride that I'm going to talk about. So I wanted to make sure that I acknowledged him and his expertise in all of this. But today I have two things that I want to share with you. The first one, I'm going to give you some brief information about the EPA's TSCA ruling on methylene chloride and how does this relate to green chemistry. And then we're going to kind of take a big picture look at how to approach a safety plan for your school and how that can support a green chemistry approach. So the first thing I want to do is talk about methylene chloride, which is probably the farthest thing from green chemistry that we're going to get, especially today. But methylene chloride is a volatile organic solvent. It has a significant vapor pressure, so it's going to evaporate very quickly when it's spilled. It is used in many different laboratory procedures and tasks. These are some images from the University of Tennessee Health Science. You can see that they're using them in chromatography. They are transferring them from one container to another. They have a rotovap. So methylene chloride is used in a number of different procedures, but it has some extreme health hazards. So when we start looking at our health hazards and even our GHS symbols, one of the things that um, we kind of bring up is we see that irritant, right? The exclamation point, and we're like, oh, it's an irritant, it's fine. But we really don't take a look a little deeper as to what that GHS actually is indicating to us. And it's indicating that methylene chloride is actually a chemical asphyxiant. It's a central nervous system toxin, in addition to being a skin and eye irritant. It has the most the words. It's associated with a lot of dizziness. It's got great anesthetic effects, similar to other organic solvents. It's a possible carcinogen. So once you're exposed to methylene chloride, a portion of it's converted in the liver to carbon monoxide, and that binds to the hemoglobin in your blood and can cause you to essentially suffocate, even though there's plenty of oxygen in the environment. So this is not one of the chemicals that we want to be using. And it is very readily used as a polar solvent, like I said, in many different lab procedures and organic processes. So one of the things that it also has been used in, and this is a OSHA and NIOSH hazard alert, but it was used in bathtub refinishing and like in that solvent and different solvents. And so there were a number of workers that were passing out and dying from using this particular bathtub refinisher in the job field. And so one of the things that is another reason why it became such a hot topic. And now we'll see that the EPA has put a final ruling on it. With methylene chloride being such a high volatile solvent with a high vapor pressure, inhalation is the primary route of exposure. But you can also be exposed through skin or a dermal route. So this is significant because that dose associated with the exposure can be significant even when you're like looking at the difference between the inhalation and the dermal exposure. So this is an injection injury. I don't think you can see my cursor, but this image is from an ACS article, and it just talked about the difference between the intercellular route. So if we're going to inject it versus that transcellular route of the dermal route of exposure. And either way, we're looking at some serious injuries by using this solvent. So what we have is that the EPA Toxic Substance Control Act provided an authority that required that we report, record keep, and test and put restrictions on methylene chloride use. So essentially, this mandated a systematic review for the safety of commercial chemicals to ensure that no chemical in the U.S. commerce poses an unreasonable risk to human health or environment. So through these acts, they have started a list of chemicals that are what we considered monitored substances. And we do have to do initial exposure testing and continued monitoring. And the final rule that just was released is that any industrial and commercial use as a laboratory chemical is permitted as long as you have what is called a workplace chemical protection program. I'm telling you all of this because this is something that is used across the nation. There are so many labs that are still using this toxic chemical. And in order to use this, you have to have an additional program where this workplace chemical protection program is now applied to all potentially exposed personnel. So before, the OSHA regulation would just be the people that like just the workers. But now it's anyone that can be exposed to this chemical, which means that it can be our students, it could be the visiting researchers, it could be an administrative personnel that just walks into your area. So anyone that is potentially exposed, we have to consider their exposure limits, and we have to consider whether or not we need to do an initial monitoring or periodic monitoring. We will have to have regulated areas, respirator will be required, and it is a self-contained breathing apparatus. Sorry, the words were escaping me. So it's a lot of work. And here is what is so fascinating. The new exposure limits are basically an order of magnitude lower than what the original OSHA exposure limits were in 1997. And with this permissible exposure limit, this 8-hour time-weighted average of 25 parts per million, the odor threshold and description for methylene chloride is that it's a colorless volatile liquid with a sweet odor. When you start to smell it, is going to be at 25 ppm. And so according to our new regulations and our new exposure limits, you are already overexposed the moment that you can smell it, and you're overexposed by an order of magnitude. So the reason that I wanted to share all of this with you is that we have done an entire series on methylene chloride, and we've actually partnered with Beyond Benign on this because when polled, 30% of our respondents said that they intended to eliminate or substitute, avoid using methylene chloride altogether. And so while we do still have a large population that has not transitioned into substituting, we are very passionate at LSI about making sure that we are educating people on the hazards and the risks associated with using methylene chloride, but also the alternatives that we have in order to eliminate this from their laboratory setting and substitute for a safer, greener alternative. And we actually did a webinar that I'll show you for that, focused specifically on substituting for methylene chloride. But thinking about the lab, this is an article from Kemi Braun. She's associated with SciShield. And one of the things when we talk about this methylene chloride regulation, I know I went through a lot of the details really fast, but the big picture is that we have this really toxic substance. We want to get it out of our labs, and we want to replace it with a greener alternative if if we're not eliminating it completely. And so how do we prepare our labs? How do we look at our labs when we have a chemical that is so hazardous that is present? So these are kind of 4 big steps that she published in her article that you can use as a way to approach having a hazardous chemical in your lab that you want to substitute. So we want to communicate and plan ahead. So the big thing with methylene chloride is you have to know anyone and everyone that uses it, and you have to know the procedures in which they're using it. So you'll have to look at their processes, and you'll have to communicate and talk with your personnel. You need to check your equipment, making sure that all of your engineering controls and your local exhaust, your fume hoods, everything is working and functioning properly. Then obviously we want to eliminate and substitute where possible. This is the big point that we want to work in partnership with people like Beyond Benign, with other labs that have the opportunity to eliminate or substitute methylene chloride where possible. One of our guest speakers was actually from Penn State, Thomas Larrabee, and he is with the EHS department, and he shared how he's working to eliminate methylene chloride at Penn State and how he's working to identify safer and greener alternatives that he can recommend to his faculty as opportunities for them to adjust the way that they're doing their chemistry. And then plan for initial and ongoing compliance. We are going to have campuses that are still using methylene chloride, and so how can we support them, making sure they're working as safely as possible, but if we can find a way to help them substitute, that would be the ultimate goal. I know that I'm working with a few campuses right now that are looking for ways to substitute, but they don't have the resources or the ability to come up with that way. So we're partnering with Beyond Benign. I'm part of the Green Chemistry Teacher, the GCTLC, and using that as a resource as well to be able to share those resources between people. So looking at this compliance timeline, I'm not sure if I'm hoping that nobody's using methylene chloride, but if it is still around your campus or your university, if you know anyone that's using it, they do have to have initial monitoring done by May 5th of this year. And then after May 5th, they have a deadline for modifying the processes and assigning appropriate PPE, and then developing their exposure control plan that will have to be submitted. But ultimately, the big thing is with this new compliance and this new regulation, it's established much significantly lower exposure limits, which is giving us this opportunity, this really great opportunity to say, hey, there's this really nasty thing. The EPA is going to come in and say, we're not going to use it anymore unless you're going to adhere to this very stringent policy. So it gives us this opportunity to develop and implement this robust lab safety program. It gives us an opportunity to substitute for greener alternatives when otherwise people may not have thought. They would have just kept going about their business because they're like, it's fine. I've been using this for 20 years and that's great. Good for you. I don't want to use it for 20 years. I want to find a safer alternative. And so it's really been a great opportunity to just educate and collaborate. The number of people that have been able to share their experiences with us has been phenomenal. And so we've learned a lot from our community as we partner with everyone. So I mentioned the GCTLC, and I know it's been mentioned a couple of times before already, but they did create a methylene chloride replacement section or strand on the GCTLC. And so we've already had users submit work, which has been fantastic because it gives us, again, an opportunity to share those findings in ways that we can replace methylene chloride in the lab setting. So another piece, because we do know that at the Lab Safety Institute, we do know that as many people that want to substitute and eliminate as possible will. We do know that there are still some people that at their moment can't or won't, whatever the reason may be. And a lot of it has to do with some of the obstacles that they face. So another poll that we did was to look at what significant obstacles are you facing to comply with this. And a lot of it is the cost of sampling. There's the knowledge in how to perform these exposure assessment. Like I said, we do have some that are going to eliminate or substitute. But as a part of our job at LSI, it's to provide safety training education. So we're continuing this conversation. Even though we've done this whole fall series, we want to make sure that those that are still needing to use methylene chloride have an opportunity to be supported through this process. So the Lab Safety Institute is actually doing a 5-part series in the spring. There'll be 1-hour sessions where you're going to actually get to work with Tim Barton through this. It'll be a working group where you can come and ask questions and share your results. Tim will walk you through basically being an industrial hygienist and how you go through this process to make sure that your lab is safe and you are ready when that TSCA deadline of May 5th comes around. So I wanted to share that with you in case we are not able to substitute for DCM, but we are wanting to change that. So the other part that I wanted to talk to you about is my approach and how I tried to build a safer lab environment when I was with Cypress-Fairbanks ISD. So these steps to a safer lab can be taken. You can take this approach with or without DCM. But we want to make sure, and I know that it was already mentioned, and I love it, the industrial hygiene hierarchy of controls. So I want to kind of walk you through each of these in case you're not familiar with this and kind of examples of what can fall under each, and then how I used this to develop a lab safety program. So the first thing that we want to do is eliminate the hazard. And like was said earlier, elimination, substitution, that's where that green chemistry lives. And it's so wonderful to be able to do that. So if you can remove the hazard or remove the chemical, obviously that's our first choice because that is going to be the most effective, right? We're going to completely remove it from the situation. But another thing to think about is what else would we need to remove? And what is the criteria for removing it? So one of the things that we looked at was whether or not it was considered inherently waste-like. So that would be your chemicals that you walk into your storage room and they've got crystals on them and you can't read the label. And it's kind of one of those, I don't want to touch that. Those are the ones that typically are considered inherently waste-like. And we want to remove those because that is a hazard that doesn't need to be present on your campus. The other thing is to look at that GHS hazard indicator and those IARC codes and whether or not it's a level 1, which would be our most hazardous on that GHS indicator. So is it a carcinogen? Is it a fetal birth defect? Is it a reproductive toxin? Those are very, those are hazardous things that we can eliminate, right? We can remove that from our supply. We can substitute with something that is less. And then obviously, if it's not aligned with the curriculum, looking at high school, some of the schools that we've worked with and that I've been in have inherited, chemicals from over time. And so their chemical storage room, it can be quite daunting. But it doesn't have to be, right? We can look at the things that are not aligned with our curriculum that we know to be a hazard. We can remove those and we can work to then substitute. So I love how safety and green chemistry just really meld together so well because as we eliminate these hazards and remove these hazardous chemicals, we come in and substitute with a less hazardous alternative. And really looking at your chemical inventory. One of the processes that we recommend putting in place is an approved or not approved list. And that goes back to, what are you ordering? What does your campus allow you to order? What is your chemical inventory, your storage capabilities, things like that? How can we minimize at best, the number of hazardous chemicals that we have on our campus? Because as the CATSI showed, so much of it can be done with our household. There's no reason for us to have unnecessary hazards present on our campus. And then you have those inherent waste costs as well. So with substitution, I probably should have put this sooner, but this is the webinar that we did. So if you are looking for substitutions for methylene chloride, it is available on our website. You can go and view the webinar. It is free. And we partnered with Beyond Benign for this. It was a really, really great conversation with a lot of great information. So I'd love for you guys to check that out if you're interested. All right, so looking at your engineering controls, engineering controls are meant to isolate people from the hazard. So the biggest thing is understanding what they are. Engineering controls are not your safety goggles, right? These are things that are meant to remove, like, protect you from the hazard. So you're looking at your safety showers, your fume hoods, which I actually didn't put on there, your eye wash stations. I wrote engineering controls again. That's me being tired. I apologize. Your fire extinguisher, fire blanket, things like that. So we're looking to inspect those and make sure that they are working, right? So how many times have we walked into a chemistry lab and the fume hood is there, but it doesn't work? So how do we remedy that, and who do we start asking? Our administrative controls are going to change the way people work. This is not at the very bottom, but it is something that can be very effective. So, with our administrative controls, we have our chemical hygiene plan. With our chemical hygiene plan, that's going to contain your standard operating procedures, your control measures, anything about your emergency facilities and your equipment. That is going to kind of lay the groundwork and the foundation for you to create your science safety manual. And your science safety manual is going to be a little bit more of a holistic approach. It's going to help push that safety culture to the next level, where you have those safety guidelines that are specific to your courses, where you're taking into consideration the different hazards and risks that are going to be experienced in chemistry versus biology versus physics. If you're taking a field trip, or if you're doing earth space, right? Those are all different hazards. There are different hazards that are present, and so therefore the risk is going to be different as well. And so having those student safety contracts in place so that the students understand, again, it's building that culture, helping them understand, okay, hey, this is what we're going to do, but we're going to do it safely because we're in this together to learn, and we can learn about science, and we can do science safely, and we can experience the science and the chemistry in our world safely. And then also providing training resources. This is a really great opportunity to build the capacity of your teachers. I know in our previous, in the breakout room, we mentioned how there's kind of a gap with our pre-service teachers. And when you go through a typical teacher training program, they don't really teach you how to teach safety to students. And so that is one of the gaps that we've identified at LSI that we want to make sure that we're focusing on. And your science safety manual is something that can help with that as well. Last line of defense to protect the worker is your PPE. So that's your goggles, your aprons, your gloves, your face shield. It's important to choose the correct PPE for the task at hand, and it's important to train on PPE. Training is so important because choosing the correct gloves, choosing the correct goggles is going to make all the difference. And then diligently wear your PPE. One of the stories that we share is of Elizabeth Griffin. She was a graduate student at Emory University, and she was one of 21 people that have died from the herpes B virus infection. She was working with rhesus monkeys, and she had finished all of her experiments. The monkey was in the cage. She had put the cover down, and she had wheeled it down the hall. But she had removed her goggles to wheel it down the hall because she was no longer doing her experiment. When she got to the end of the hall, there was no sound or anything coming from the cage, so she gently lifted the cover, and something was flung at her from the monkey, and it got in her eye, and 6 weeks later, she died. And so it was just again, to kind of remind them that we need to be diligent in what constitutes the lab space, what constitutes the experiment, when should we be wearing our PPE, and when is it safe to remove it. So looking at how this translates to your school, because I know I'm running up close to my time, we want you to stay safe. We want your students to be safe, and your teachers, everyone, to have that approach that we're going to look at things from this risk assessment lens. So I started integrating this in my previous district, and it was a 4-year process. So that was another thing, is this isn't something that we were able to complete overnight. With the first year, it was a lot of identification of the issues, gathering information. Are our engineering controls being tested? How do we handle our waste? Where does it go? Who's doing anything with it? And then eliminate all the immediate hazards. We had a company come in that walked through all of our high school and middle school labs and eliminated anything that was an immediate hazard. And we began developing a process for hazardous waste. And the big piece that ties everything together is training those teachers. We've got to train them on how to do that chemical inventory and train our students, right? So that everyone has that built capacity. And the second year, we started substituting. Once we had eliminated those major hazards, it's like, okay, well, we still have labs we need to do. How can we substitute and find a safer alternative? We then began working on that approved chemical list, where we were able to say, look, these are safe, these are good, let's use these, and eliminate additional hazards that were expired, that maybe weren't an immediate danger at the moment when we walked, but also needed to be taken from the campus. Again, we continued that with additional training and additional safety guidelines that were customized to each course that we offered. The third year, we went into more of our engineering controls and testing those. We purchased test kits that were like a safety shower test kit. So it's literally a bucket and a ring and a shower curtain. But so often our teachers won't test the showers because it floods everything. But it's really important to have those showers tested, because you're going to have a lot of rust and bacteria that will build up in those standing pipes. So we implemented a process for district-wide testing. We finalized our approved list for our chemicals. We started with our digital chemical inventory. We started our own process for that, and again, continued training. And this time we started training our administrators. So we've started with our students, we've started with our teachers, and now we've got to push it higher to our administrators, because they matter in this picture as well, in order to have a holistic approach. Our fourth year, we continue to refine our process for shower testing. We surveyed campuses for their needs, for their PPE, launched digital inventory lists with our approved and not approved, where now we're seeing that the teachers are like, well, you're taking away my dangerous chemical, but it's, again, changing that mindset of, I'm not trying to take anything away. It's, how can we explore science and explore chemistry safely? What alternatives can we bring in different ways that we can share science with our students, that is not adding an unnecessary hazard and not increasing the risk? And so it's that safety culture and that mindset shift. And it's all going to come back to that training. How are we building our teachers up and building their capacity and helping them grow and understand the importance of it? So all of my experiences that I've had so far in building this is led us to create our Safer Science Framework. So LSI has this Safer Science Framework. It's a holistic approach to safety that is based on 6 essential elements, because we believe that safety is not a one and done. We can focus on getting our kids prepared at the beginning of the year, but safety should be incorporated into everything that we do every day. And not only is that with our materials management, the chemicals that we choose to use and how we substitute for safer alternatives, but making sure that we have the facilities in place in the event that there is an emergency, that we're incorporating our curriculum. We can use our green chemistry curriculum. We can make sure that the chemicals that we're using align with our curriculum, and we're not just choosing a video we saw on YouTube and we're going to try it because it looks cool. Like there's so many ways that we can teach students to love science without them having to have something blow up. And I think that Cassie shared a great job of that. And then it's got to be sustainable. So with this framework, we have developed a program that you can check out on our website, but we're also launching our Safer Science Summits that are going to be free for our teachers. So we have one in Boston and one in Cincinnati. We have one that will be launching soon in Houston. And this is a week-long training for teachers to learn about how to handle safer science, how to build their capacity, and how to take it back to their classroom. We'll have workshops, we'll have demos, we'll have teach them how to do a lab inspection and go to do an actual lab inspection at a local school district. But the big thing is we just want to help teachers feel empowered to do safer science in their classroom. And whether they're substituting or whether or not they're eliminating, we want them to change their culture to be a safety culture mindset so that we can empower our students, because they are the students, they are the workforce of tomorrow. So if they're not building good foundations of safer practices in K-12, that's going to translate as they move up to our college and university and then into the workforce. So we're all about training them up from the beginning and making sure they have a strong foundation. We also have membership as well, just like Beyond Benign, and we can offer additional support. But I thank you for your time. I know I probably went over, but we really are excited about the things that we're doing here at the Laboratory Safety Institute and the way that we can help support teachers to do safer science through many different avenues.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Hope you had some more good discussions in the breakout rooms. We're just going to wrap up our connections today with some announcements from the higher ed team at Beyond Benign.
Hello, everyone. I'm sorry, I was trying to unmute and it was not letting me, which is very offensive, actually. If you want to go to the next slide, we have our routine plug for the GCTLC. You've heard it mentioned here quite a few times tonight. Hint, hint, maybe you should check it out. But the Green Chemistry Teaching and Learning Community is an online platform where you can access hundreds of free curriculum resources. We have more than 140 open forum threads where green chemistry educators like you are collaborating, sharing ideas, and staying in the loop all around the world. So yes, we have more than 1,500 users from over 80 countries. And I've dropped this link in the chat a couple of times. I won't do it again, but it is just gctlc.org if you're interested. It is 100% free. Can we go to the next slide, please? We are also pretty soon, which is scary to think about because it will be 2025. We will be hosting a showcase for the recently developed curriculum module, case study module, exploring sustainable practices in metal plating, the drive for greener innovations. So if you go to the Beyond Benign upcoming events page, I'm just going to drop the link in the chat. You can find the registration there. That's our event calendar. You can find, if you have any questions about any of the events I mentioned for the next 5 seconds, that is your place to look. Essentially, these are really workshops where we have the people who developed the module walk through it and answer questions and workshop with the attendees. So more for a higher ed audience. We have this plug for the second Australian Conference on Green and Sustainable Chemistry and Engineering. It will be held from the 8th to the 12th of December at Ridges, Melbourne. If anybody in here is joining from the Australian or even just the other side of the planet from where I currently am in the United States. Also wanted to give a quick shout out to a conference being held at the GCC signing institution, the University of Nottingham. That will be held on January 9th at 8 a.m. Starting at 8 a.m., but all day until 4 p.m. This is another one that if you want more details, check out our website. And yeah, just to wrap things up before we introduce our theme for next month, we will be at the ACS Spring 2025 meeting, yay, this March. So come out and see us if you'll be there. We would love to say hello, as well as looking a little bit more ahead, the Green Chemistry and Engineering Conference in 2025 in June, which will be held in Pittsburgh, PA. We are going to be all over that. So we'll hope to see you there. And yes, next month we will host a Green Chemistry Connections webinar once again in the Eastern Savings time. I always forget if it's standard or savings. It's really embarrassing. But it will be from 12 to 2 p.m. our time, 4 to 6 a.m. In Australian Eastern Daylight Time. So this will be December 18th. We will have the winners of the Green Chemistry posters from the Latinx Chem virtual conference come and share some of their work, as well as the organizers. We're very proud to have sponsored those who placed in the green chemistry category. So we'll be happy to have them come and represent. And I believe that's all that I had, but I can wrap it up, I guess. Thank you all to all of our sponsors. You make this work possible and do so much more than that. So we're happy that we can be here virtually talking to you all. So thank you.